Well, welcome again for our Gardening with Butterflies here at After Hours with the Flowers. Did everyone get their butterfly garden book that's actually free, courtesy of Wild Ones? They're at the back of the room. And yes, they are free to take home, courtesy again of Minnesota Wild Ones. We'll let everyone pick one of those up. And if you didn't know, Wild Ones is a local, well, it's actually a national organization now, started in Wisconsin, promoting natural landscaping and landscaping with native plants. And I will start as people are getting their seats, but my name is Alan Branhagen. I'm Director of Operations here at the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum. Of course, it looks like we've got a lot of repeat customers. That's good. So you probably already heard that, but if anyone's new in the room, yeah. So I'm in charge of horticulture, plant curation. Again, we're a living museum, so we do keep records of all our plants, living museum, and then the facilities here and IT. So a big job. But I'm also a naturalist and plantsman besides doing that. And I've been interested in nature since I was a wee one. I talked about birds earlier, and I was probably 3 years old when I learned my first bird, very, very small. So birds actually were first. I have the 3 Bs that I really love: birds, butterflies, and botany. And so next was butterflies, and I was age 5 when I caught my first butterfly. My brother is 8 years older than me, and he was doing a mandatory insect collection for science class, I think in junior high. So I was following him around, and the one thing is he went on to do all kinds of other stuff, but I never left learning about butterflies. But anyway, so today we're here to talk about gardening with butterflies. And of course, they are Lepidoptera. I also have to throw in some of these science terms. That's the scale-winged insects, actually the 4th most diverse order of insects. So there are, many, many types of butterflies, but that also includes the moths. So moths and butterflies are actually interrelated. But what's neat about them to me is they're almost, how do you describe metamorphosis? Isn't that just amazing what our butterflies go through? They start as an egg that emerges to a caterpillar, and then that caterpillar makes a chrysalis and emerges as a butterfly? It's almost like, are you kidding me? It's just one of those absolute amazing marvels of nature. And if you didn't know, the Greek word for psyche, psyche is what they called butterflies, and they thought literally they were, transported our souls to heaven. So a lot of that metamorphosis and that uniqueness of them, has always been, captured human imagination. And I think caterpillars are just the coolest things. These are some butterfly and moth ones. But look at this one. This is the milkweed tussock moth. They look like little schnauzers. And if you have milkweeds, you'll get a whole team of them that can eat everything. And of course, monarchs here, these really striking colors. These are, of course, because they get toxins from the milkweed, what makes them unpalatable to birds. And birds learn, don't ever mess with anything brightly colored caterpillar because it's going to taste awful and make me throw up. So the birds don't mess much with these because they're just so hairy to try to eat one. This is actually a tiger swallowtail caterpillar on its first few stages. When it hatches from an egg, a caterpillar actually has to go through usually 5, they're called instars, where it grows so big that it has to shed its skin to be able to grow to the next stage. But tiger swallowtails, what does that look like? A bird dropping. They mimic bird droppings when they're little, so things won't want to eat them. And look at this, you can barely see it. Isn't that neat? That's the the laurel or fawn sphinx caterpillar in my backyard feed only on ash trees. That's one of the things that never gets talked about with the plague of the emerald ash borer. There actually are quite a few species of insects and several, there are all these neat sphinx moths. I think there's 5 different ones that feed only on ash trees. If all the ash trees are gone, what's going to happen? No one ever talks about it. And then this one's another moth that feeds only on milkweeds called the delicate Cisnea, and it also is toxic, and that usually things that are bright orange are toxic, and birds learn to not mess with them. But the key things on gardening for butterflies are obviously that you have to think of that metamorphosis. So you got to have the host plants, because caterpillars only feed on a specific plant or a specific group of plants for the most part. There are some, they're called polyphagous, that'll eat almost anything, but most of them are really specific. And then of course, when they emerge as adult butterflies, they have to have some food, which for the most part is nectar from flowers, though some of them actually like to land on dung and scat, but overripe fruit and things like that. And the biggest thing to think about also is habitat. Where do these things go in the winter? Where are the monarchs right now? Mexico. Yeah, we actually have a full tour again. I'm sure it will fill up again. We'll go again next year in February. Our director, Pete Moe, is leading, what is it, in just 2 weeks, or is it a week away, going down to see where the monarchs overwinter. I got to do that a year ago in February, and it is an amazing experience. All the monarchs from Canada, the eastern and central United States, all congregate in these small areas for the winter. So it doesn't matter what you do for monarchs, other than you got to have milkweeds for when they come back to raise the next generations on. But a lot of these butterflies are here all winter. And of course, if you heard the bird talk, these things are bird food, and luckily a lot of them lay lots and lots of eggs, and we want them to be part of the web of life. But of course, we also want some of them to survive. And we'll start out going through the types of butterflies we have right here in the Twin Cities area. And some of the biggest and favorites are the swallowtails, called that because they have these long tails on the ends of their hind wings. All of our swallowtails overwinter as a chrysalis. So that chrysalis of all the swallowtails that will emerge in April or May they're out there right now looking, well, I guess I have a picture coming up. Here, I'll go back, whoops, sorry. All of them, the caterpillar actually goes in this position, has a little belt that holds them in place, or he or she in place, and then they make a chrysalis like that again will overwinter for the next year. These are actually black swallowtails, which feed on plants in the carrot family. Here's a tiger swallowtail on a plant. I talked about it with the birds too, the anise hyssop, one of the best plants you can plant in your garden. Edible for us, but great for butterflies and birds. The tiger swallowtails are probably our most common swallowtail in this area. What the heck is that one? They come in yellow. Some of the females are black. And this was a weird bilateral dimorphic female that one of our volunteers said, I saw this butterfly that was half and half. And I'm like, send me a picture, and he did. And that can actually happen. And it actually can happen where one half is male and one half is female. And they're called bilateral gynandromorphs. And I actually have seen that before too, but I had to throw in that picture. But some of them are black because there's a species just to our south of swallowtail that's black and blue and toxic. And so birds learn, remember birds migrate, they learn to avoid this pattern. Really interesting. And whoops, here I got to go back. I forget to talk about, I list, and of course that booklet you got will talk about these. Here, I apologize. There we go, sorry. the specific host plants, black cherry ash. This is one, if the ashes go away, you can still have them because they've got other choices. Hop tree, tulip tree, and magnolias are the host plants of tiger swallowtails. And there's 2 broods. In other words, the ones that are in chrysalises right now will emerge this spring, usually at the very end of April, mostly in May, and sometimes even all the way into June. Those will, mate and lay eggs and have caterpillars that will make a chrysalis this summer, and that chrysalis will emerge in late July or August for the next brood, which then that's the one that overwinters for the next year. The black swallowtail is another really common one, and I think a lot of people know this one. If you've had parsley or dill or fennel in your garden or planter box, a lot of herb lovers say, well, I had these green caterpillars come and eat all my parsley. And I'm like, well, that's the black swallowtail. It also has multiple broods in the summer. It for whatever reason has become very uncommon lately, which is really a sad issue with a lot of our butterflies. And we're trying to understand why they are really in decline. But look again, the female black swallowtail, does it remind you of that other tiger swallowtail? Again, it's that black and blue pattern. Males have these bright yellow bands on them, but they feed only on plants in the carrot family, and they don't care if they're native or not. Parsley, dill, and fennel, which are not native herbs, but some of our wild plants like golden alexanders and angelica are plants in the wild that it will feed on. And a new kid on the block, giant swallowtails. This is a really interesting story. Here's the tiger swallowtail again. This is our Mandarin Lights azalea, and I think of that as when Mandarin Lights azaleas bloom, that's when the giant swallowtails come out. But that was a butterfly that not that long ago was a tropical butterfly, and one gene in it flipped to make it hardy. And it feeds on things in the citrus family. In fact, if I was an orange grower up here, I'd be cursing this thing. They hate them in Florida because they actually can get so many they can damage citrus fields. But here we have this little weedy, well, I shouldn't call it that. The prickly ash, a very common shrub in our woods around these areas, are actually in that family, and the giant swallowtails feed on that. And they've spread now all the way to Minnesota. And yes, they're chrysalises. They have the same life cycle as the tiger swallowtail. Their chrysalises survive the winter. I've seen them emerge after 35 below zero, pretty amazing. I remember, it's like 1974, I saw the first one. I mean, they were really very, very uncommon, but they're getting more and more common. And really, last summer was the most I've ever seen of them. And I think we're going to see more and more of them. And it is the largest butterfly that we have in this area, by the way. But again, if you want it, you gotta, plant a Mandarin Lights azalea, but prickly ash, if you have that in the woods, or if you have a natural area, plant prickly ash, because that will help attract them. I think everyone knows the next family, the whites and sulfurs. If you garden with cabbage family plants, you probably hate this butterfly. It's one of our few that are an introduced butterfly, the cabbage white or European cabbage butterfly. I actually, I gave up on vegetable gardening because of deer, but I don't mind them. I actually think they kind of add a little color in the winter. I mean, in the growing season, adding, a nice blend out there, getting some white with the butterflies flying around. This is actually a rare woodland endemic white called the mustard white, feeds on native mustard plants. And I took this picture here at the Arboretum, was a new species for this site, which was kind of cool. And these all overwinter as chrysalises. And then this is a little yellow we get in the summertime. And this is one that actually doesn't survive the winter. It actually is killed. And then every year, new ones from the south immigrate here for the summertime, which is kind of an interesting life cycle. And here's the 2 really common sulfur butterflies. I think almost everyone, if you've seen a yellow butterfly in your garden, it's probably one of these, either a clouded sulfur or a orange sulfur, and you're looking, well, what's the difference? Well, if you can see, and these things, they only open their wings when they fly, so I don't have a picture of where their wings open. But you can look in that book, she's got some showing that, but these are really more cantaloupe color, and these are really yellow. This is another interesting one that's changed recently. These used to be really common when I was a kid, and these not very common, and now these are more common, and these also used to not survive the winter, and then now do. Really interesting climate change issues happening with butterflies right now. Yeah, if you know, out especially in alfalfa and hay fields out in the country, these are two really common butterflies. And they also overwinter as chrysalises. We have these little tiny gossamer butterflies, the blues. Isn't that spectacular? Of course, it's really only as big as my thumbnail, but it's the most beautiful iridescent blue. That's the eastern-tailed blue, because it has these little tiny tails here and these little eye spots. And when it sits there, it actually moves its hind wings, moves these hind wings so that these little antennae move. Why would you think a butterfly would do that? And its real head is here with its antenna. It's actually a decoy for anything that wants to catch it to go to the wrong end, and oftentimes can get away. Isn't that interesting? And they've actually done the research, and the thing that it's most afraid of are spiders, and the spiders get fooled. So anyway, this is a real, you know, start paying attention for this. It can feed on clover in your lawn. Becoming, you know, it's prevalent, but I think people overlook it. The caterpillars just look like a greenish slug. This is a very similar species in that family. And then the spring and summer azures. Here, this picture, again, you only see the blue when they open their wings. This is a spring azure, and it's in the clutches of a spider. This one doesn't have the tails like the eastern tail blue. Anyway, so I got a picture of one with its wings open. This one comes out only in spring, and almost exclusively its caterpillars feed only on dogwoods. And then later in May and June, we have another species called the summer azure that's very, very similar that comes out. And here you can see they like scat. As well as nectar on flowers. Here's a leatherwood flower, if you know that woodland shrub with the little yellow bells. We have a lot of them by our Barron's cabin here in the woods of that shrub, one of our first things to bloom, and very good nectar source for these azures. And the other weird thing is this one only comes out once a year in the spring, you know, and then of course it lays its eggs. The caterpillars feed on actually the flowers and developing fruit of the dogwoods, produces a chrysalis that doesn't hatch out all the way until the next spring, while summer azures, I mean, they look almost identical, whoops, but have a completely different life cycle. They'll come out a little later in spring and, you know, feed on all kinds of like viburnums, dogwoods, on the flowers and developing fruits, but the next brood will, you know, you'll have a next brood. By summer, another generation will hatch, and actually you can even get a third. I've seen these flying in September with a third brood. Little hair streaks. How many of you knew what a hair streak was before? And these are the masters of what that eastern tail blue does. They have these little streaks, little fake antennas on their hind wings with fake eyes. Again, it's a distraction so that they can survive. We actually have several species here at the Arboretum. This one, the banded one, the Edwards one, and our only green butterfly, the olive juniper hair streak, that the only plant that this one's caterpillar feeds on is the red cedar. And all of these are, well, I shouldn't say that. This one's double brooded, but most of them are single brooded, where these come out in summer and their caterpillars feed on leaves and then make a chrysalis, and they will not hatch until after the, that's not right. These lay eggs that overwinter, excuse me. They're one of our few butterflies where the eggs overwinter and the eggs emerge with the new fresh growth on the buds, and they feed on those. Then we have the brush-footed butterflies. A lot of these are kind of little. Pay more attention in your garden next year. This is a little pearl crescent and the silvery checker spot. This is a silvery checker spot caterpillar. They look like these little, I don't know, little black hedgehogs, but you can actually get so many of them. They love to feed on anything in the aster family. Purple coneflowers, I've seen them actually devour purple coneflower plants where there's no leaves left on them. But of course, I forgive them because I know I'm going to have this butterfly then. And these are ones where actually the caterpillar overwinters. So I think you've all heard about what we're trying to promote in gardening now called leave the leaves. This is your prime example why you leave the leaves, because these little caterpillars are down in the leaf litter under the aster plants or coneflower plants or whatever, overwintering. And then of course in the spring when they warm up, they come back to life. Pretty amazing that these things have extracellular freezing, so they can freeze solid but not die. Talk about, we're trying to perfect cryogenics. Well, nature has already done it, of course. And the biggest one in this group is the great spangled fritillary. One of my favorite butterflies, one brood a year, one of our longest lived butterflies. It has a caterpillar, this black with like these little red warts on it, kind of an interesting thing. And these feed only on violets. And these also, the caterpillars feed on the spring violets. And so they overwinter actually as the first instar caterpillar, that first stage. The adult butterflies lay the eggs all through the summer and into the fall. The egg emerges as this little tiny caterpillar and then just stays there all winter waiting for the violets to come up in the spring and then starts feeding. And that's its whole life cycle, which to me is pretty amazing. And another reason to leave the leaves, especially around your violets. Don't rake it all up, don't burn it, because you will kill them. And if you practice it, this was actually my Missouri yard. I still don't have a good flock here in Chaska. I have had them come into my yard. And I actually took this picture. When I get flocks of them, I could start to tell the females live into the fall and are still laying eggs. The males, they mate and pretty much are gone, but the females are one of our longest lived butterflies into the fall. And in the fall, they get pretty tattered, and that's how I could almost start naming them. I could tell which ones are which based on how much their wings were broken. But anyway, amazing for the adult butterfly to live that long and not hibernate. Of course, our monarchs are very long-lived because in the fall, that last brood flies all the way to Mexico, spends the winter there, and then, of course, returns to the United States. Doesn't make it all the way back to Minnesota. It's the next brood that gets here, but anyway. And these things, remember I talked about those swallowtails that are black and blue? This is the red spotted purple, which is in that mimicry complex. What butterfly is that? Of course, the label's right there, but what does that look like? A monarch. The admirals are mimics. The red spotted purple is an admiral, and the viceroy is actually an admiral. If you're wondering, you see this butterfly, is it a monarch or a viceroy? The big thing you always look for is the V for viceroy. Monarchs do not have that vein that makes that V. So good way to tell them apart. Both of these have 2 broods a year, and it's shocking how they overwinter in your garden. There it is. The little tiny caterpillar is in that shelter out there now to emerge this next spring. The viceroys feed on willows, and the red spotted purples feed on more things like service berries and poplars and things. But yeah, the caterpillar, before it goes to winter, eats most of the leaf, but leaves a little centerpiece that it curls up in, and of course puts its silk all over the rest of the leaf petiole and silk around the twig to make sure the leaf doesn't fall off. It's in its little sleeping bag all winter. I mean, isn't that amazing? And then, yeah, the caterpillar comes out in the spring to feed on the fresh new leaves. And then that brood makes a butterfly usually in June, and then those mate, have eggs, get more caterpillars. Another brood comes out in the fall, and it's that fall one caterpillar that makes that little hideaway to survive to the next year. So did you know butterflies are so complex? To me, it's just incredible that they even exist. The ladies are also in this group. The painted lady, one of our most common butterflies. And I will bet you, most of you know this butterfly. Remember, like, it was like, what, 4 years ago? There were thousands of them in the garden. They were in the sedums blooming in the fall. They were covered with these. Well, that's because this butterfly is another migrant. In the fall, these migrate. They are not hardy whatsoever. They migrate to the south, to the Sonoran Desert, and further south to spend the winter. And when the Southwest has a major rain event like they've just had, if you've seen pictures from Arizona and California now, they've got this amazing desert bloom coming on. The painted ladies are going to go berserk, and then they immigrate back here. Not, it's a new generation, but I'll bet because of this super bloom in the desert Southwest, we're going to have thousands of painted ladies in Minnesota this summer. Who knew it was so connected, right? In Europe, another name for this butterfly is the cosmopolitan because it is found on every continent except Antarctica and I believe Australia. Or is it South America? It's one other continent it's not found on. But in Europe, this is the migratory winter. They've documented butterflies in the fall from Sweden flying all the way to sub-Saharan Africa. And then the red admiral is actually a type of lady. That's another one of our prevalent butterflies. Painted ladies, if you have anything in the mallow family, like hollyhocks, anything in the thistle family, globe thistles, that's what they feed on. Red admirals like nettles, so there's a plant we don't really like in our garden, but is important for butterflies. And we have these butterflies called anglewings. This one is called the question mark, and dang it, I forgot to put a picture of why it's called the question mark. And it is another one that's two-brooded. This is the one that comes, to me it doesn't make sense, but this is the one that comes out in the summer, and this is the one that comes out in the fall and overwinters. To me that doesn't make sense because don't you want to have more black to absorb heat in the winter? But nope, defies nature. But is the fall form of this question mark, which they're out there now as an adult butterfly. The adult butterfly overwinters. Another reason to leave the leaves. Though these are more likely to be like in wood piles and under bark and stuff like that. Unfortunately, you buy those little butterfly house decor, probably not in there, sorry. Those are really just garden art. But look at the edged in lavender. I mean, what a cool plant or butterfly. And it has this, when it closes its wings, it actually has a silver question mark on the underside. And that's how it got its name. And its first cousin is the eastern comma, because if it closes its wings, it has a comma. But it's the same thing, two broods with the one that overwinters looking like this. Here's a spring shot from here at the Arboretum. The service berry is out in the parking lot blooming, and the comma has come back to life to start to nectar and make the next generation, which will be this one coming out in summer. So cool butterflies. And if you live in northern Minnesota, oh my God, there's even more varieties of commas. There's a green comma, a hoary comma, and a satyr comma up in Duluth and northward. A lot of diversity up there of these things. And these also all overwinter as adult butterflies. And the morning cloak, another one, it's out there right now as an adult butterfly. And actually on warm days, maybe yesterday would have been warm enough for them to come out of hibernation to fly around. This is one of the first butterflies you'll see flying. And yes, the snow can still be on the ground when it comes out. Yeah, beautiful brown with yellowish edging and these beautiful blue spots. When it closes its wings, it's black with that edging, just looks like bark. Another one of our longest lived butterflies, because only one brood a year that overwinters lays eggs in the spring that really by June already have hatched as a new butterfly. And then that new butterfly actually You know about hibernation. What does a butterfly that isn't active in the summer? Do you know what that's called? Estivation. They estivate. They'll go into a sleep through the heat of summer and then come back to life in the fall. And then over winter. Sounds like I'm making all this up, doesn't it? But I mean, it is. It's just so amazing to me. And this is one of those polyphagous things. It eats all kinds of plants, plums and elms and quaking aspen and poplars and all kinds of stuff its caterpillars will feed on. And then, of course, the poster child, the gateway species to get one interested in butterflies. Though the first butterfly caught was an orange sulfur, but when I was a kid, I thought monarchs were just the coolest thing, and of course, I'm still just marvel at them, and never thought I would witness, the population crash of those. That it is rebounding now, but it was really scary for a while. Probably, you can't get political, but it's probably GMO crop change, just because it took a while for all that Roundup using to kill out all the milkweeds in all the fields of Iowa and southern and western Minnesota and so on, really was an impact. The neat thing is, these lay lots of eggs, and we all did a call to action. And what did everyone do? Planted milkweed. We all stepped up and added milkweed plants to our communities and to our roadsides and to our gardens. And we have made a difference on the monarch. And then, they lay hundreds of eggs, each brood. So it's not like a lot of our songbirds might lay 4 eggs and have, 1 or 2 broods a year. It's not much chance to bounce back. But monarchs, if she lays 100 and even 20 of those make it, and all those emerge in the summer and have 20, each 20 more, it's amazing how resilient they can be. So an amazing butterfly, of course, must have milkweeds as its host plant. You don't need to worry about what you do in your garden for the winter because they're in Mexico. But the best thing is also to plant, especially asters in the fall and blazing stars in late summer, so that they can really get a lot of energy and fatten up for their big migration south. Let's see, I'm already going over time. And then there's some butterflies called skippers that are really kind of moth-like. A lot of people don't know these very well. The silver-spotted skipper is one of the neatest ones. Whole bunch of different dusky wings. This one called the Columbine dusky wing. And there's another one called the wild indigo dusky wing. You can't tell them apart unless you dissect them in a lab, but in your garden you can tell them apart because the Columbine dusky wings are on the Columbine. They're always flying around the Columbine, and the wild indigo are flying around the Baptisias. But they're not very colorful, but these are still butterflies. We have a bunch of little grass skipper species, most of them orange. And then this is, besides the cabbage white, the European skipper is another introduced species. Sachems last summer became very common. They're a butterfly that comes from the south but doesn't overwinter. But pay attention to the little guys on your garden next year. We'll just do a little bit about moths because I know I'm a little over, but moth diversity is mind-boggling. For every species of butterfly in Minnesota, there's like 26 species of moths. And this is at my nightlight. Look at how many, this is a moth. Some of them are so little. You see the little lines on a leaf. It's the caterpillar is actually a leaf miner feeding inside the leaf. And of course, when it emerges, it's one of these, they're called micro moths. But they are so important for, a healthy environment, especially as bird food. Of course, we really love the big showy ones. The Luna moth is probably my favorite of all moths. And that's one that the cocoon must overwinter in the leaf litter in contact with the ground. So that's another one. If you're raking up all your leaves or anything like that, you are destroying your Luna moths. Cecropia, the biggest moth in North America. And of course, the caterpillars of moths are just so outrageous too. The paddle caterpillar, look at this one on goldenrod, just amazing the diversity. And of course, if you plant it, they will come. So this is actually in my Missouri garden. But yeah, I could have my butterfly feeder. This is a hanging bird bath, and I would just throw like banana, overripe bananas, banana peels, cantaloupe rinds, peach pits, all that kind of stuff in there, and just kind of let it brew up over the summer. And the butterflies would come and go crazy feeding on that. It is, again, a hanging bird bath, and it's on is it nylon? It's on a cord, a UV resistant cord, because if it's on a chain, the possums and raccoons can get on it, but they can't do the little cord. So you have to think about things like that. These also do attract flies and wasps, so it's not something you want right by your patio, but I had this off to the side of my front yard, and it would be so fun to go see the abundance of butterflies on it. So try doing a butterfly. And of course, here's my front yard here in Chaska. I do practice what I preach, remove invasive plants, no pesticides, no fertilizers, and you will have a garden filled with nature. Of course, the booklet, I actually did help with this, just hot off the press. I'm so glad we could give it away. But it talks about, the best nectar and host plants. And I don't know if anyone wants to take a screenshot with their cameras, phone cameras, they can. But, these to me are the 25 best nectar plant groups. And I don't know if I go to the next one or go back, sorry, sure. And then the best host plants, that do the most variety. But again, some of them are very specific, but you're going to do really well with having the ones on this list in your garden. I don't know what would be the absolute best. Violets are good for so many things. Willows, and of course, milkweeds for the monarch. Please do that. So anyway, thank you so much for your attention this evening. I hope you were inspired by the diversity of butterflies and their amazing life cycle, and I hope you all garden for them so that we have more. To me, they're just a visceral element of a garden. A garden without butterflies, is it a garden? I don't know. Anyway, thank you all. Have a great night.